back again, and today we're going to be talking about top 10 fall niche fragrances. So stay tuned for that. And if you like the video, guys, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Before we get into the content, guys, what niche fragrance are you most excited about wearing this fall? Leave a comment down below and let me know. I decided to start this list off with something a little bit more affordable because we all know niche has crazy prices, but there is a niche house that is relatively affordable, and that is Marley. They have a huge selection of fragrances, so it's really hard to know which ones to try out. So of course it's best to sample first because it's very hard to know otherwise. But I'm putting this one on the list because it's not quite cold enough for the heavier fragrances. This one is a very nice oud fragrance. It has saffron in it, which comes off a little bit sweet and dry, and there is a slight sweetness and floral quality to it. This isn't actually that spicy, which is kind of the only disappointment I have with this fragrance. I wish it was spicier, especially with a name like Spicy Oud. But it is nice, and it has a very nice sort of hay-like accord as well. The oud starts off a little bit rough, a little bit synthetic smelling, but it does definitely dry down into a very nice, smooth oud fragrance. This one does at times lean feminine, especially in the opening. There is that orange note, which is actually gorgeous. I really like the orange. But all in all, it is a nice fragrance for the price. You can get this a 50 ml for under $50 if you look around for it. So really it is something that's easy to wear, and it is enjoyable. The dry down is probably the best part. It does perform very well, very long lasting, nice projection, and overall a nice fragrance. In my number 9 position, I'm going to go with Amouage Jubilation 25. This one opens up a very nice, strong blackberry that's a little bit dark and definitely also a little bit boozy. This one actually has oud in it that's kind of a little hay-like, so it does have a hay-like quality with a nice woody accord. If you mix that all together with the nice berries, especially the very prominent blackberry, it is a very powerful fragrance. And in typical Amouage fashion, this one performs extremely well. It's quite loud, it's very long lasting, so you do get what you pay for. It is a little bit more challenging, I think, just because of the way this one dries down, but it is very, very enjoyable. My number 8 spot goes to none other than Cape Heartache by Imaginary Authors. This one is actually a really interesting fragrance, and I think the opening is what would put a lot of people off this one and makes it a little more challenging. In the opening, this one is quite intensely smoky with a pine vibe to it. So it's very, very smoky. It doesn't come off like a campfire. It doesn't come off like a fireplace. It does just have this very intense woody smokiness. Now, as it dries down, that smokiness definitely disappears and the strawberry starts to become a lot more prominent. This becomes a sweet, woody fragrance with a nice, strong pine note as well. And I think it creates a really nice mixture of a sweet, woody accord. Really enjoy this one. Kind of really reminds me of being perhaps out in the woods, out in a cabin with some kind of strawberries as well. Very interesting, very enjoyable. Cape Heartache by Imaginary Authors. My number 7 fragrance is actually one that I do think is a little bit underrated from the house, and that is Viking by Creed. This one came off as the next masculine fragrance after Aventus, so I think ultimately it would never have lived up to anybody's expectation for it. But I went into it expecting more or less nothing, but hopefully a good fragrance, and to me that's what I got. This is a really gorgeous barbershop fragrance. It has a lot of nice mint and spice, especially in the opening, and this one dries down to a really, really beautiful rose. And I'm not the hugest fan of rose fragrances, but this is such a nice rose, and it works so well with the whole barbershop vibe that it has going on that I do really, really enjoy this one. It is definitely a little bit expensive for what it is, but I think that if you can get this one at a good price, it's definitely worth the purchase. And perhaps one day, hopefully one day, I will be picking up a bottle of this one. Next on the list is African Leather. This is another one I just recently checked out. I think for this one, ultimately the biggest put off is the price point. This is a very expensive fragrance, and I probably would not purchase it at the price that they're offering it, but it is a nice fragrance. It's very enjoyable. This is one I'm going to be looking for on discounters or trying to find some way to get a lot cheaper because retail is insane. But this one opens up quite rough. It has a lot of spicy and animalic raw kind of leather. This leather isn't like the kind of leather in ombre leather. It's not like Tuscan leather or Godolphin. It is this really raw leather that almost feels like it's on the hide of a rhinoceros or something like that. And it has some nice spiciness. This one does dry down really interesting and actually in some ways reminds me of like an orange soda with booze in it for some particular reason. I'm not sure why. That rawness, the animalic of the leather definitely dies down. And it still has a sort of raw leather, but definitely not like in the opening. So this is definitely an interesting fragrance. Performs well, priced insanely. So I would say if you can find this one on the cheap, it could be worth checking out. And I do enjoy that one. So that is African Leather by Memo. Next on the list is one of my favorite boozy fragrances, and that is Single Malt by Killian. This one has a really gorgeous boozy, whiskey, syrupy opening. The booziness and the syrupiness reminds me a lot of apple brandy. Not that it smells the same, but it has a sort of similar syrupy sweetness. And this one has a nice whiskey that actually reminds me a lot more of rye whiskey than a single malt scotch. That's actually for me a good thing because I really prefer a rye whiskey over a single malt scotch, or more or less any scotch for that matter. So it smells really good to my nose. Also, it dries down with a nice woodiness in there. And all in all, it's very enjoyable. And if you like boozy fragrances and you haven't checked this one out, definitely give this one a shot. Single Malt by Killian. Next on the list is Oud for Greatness by Initio. This one is actually really, really good. I'm very happy to have sampled this one. I may pick up a bottle of this one in the future. This one opens up almost a little deceptively because it's very, very oud forward, I find, in the opening, with a little bit of spice and a little bit of sweetness. But within the first 20 minutes or so, this becomes much more spicy and much more sweet. And the spiciness works really well with this fragrance. It has a really nice spicy sweetness with a more supporting, to my nose, tone of oud with it. And altogether, it works really well. It's a very well balanced fragrance, balanced between the spicy and the sweet. Not too much oud to make it. It's by no means a skanky or animalic oud. It's more of a just woody, natural smelling oud. And it is a really great fragrance. Now we are on to the top three, the best of the best for the season. And my number 3 spot is going to Carlisle by Parfums de Marley. This is also an oudy fragrance with spice, but I find this one to be quite different. In the opening, it's very in your face, very spicy, very aggressive, but the way this one dries down is really quite something special. It turns into this extremely creamy, chocolatey fragrance, almost bordering on gourmand. I'm not really sure where that chocolatey note is coming from, but it's just so creamy and smooth and so enjoyable to wear. Really do like this one. Works really well for the cold weather. That's my number 3 spot. In my number 2 spot, none other than Mula Mula. I've been waiting a long time to wear this fragrance again. This is a really gorgeous gourmand fragrance, and if you are a gourmand lover and you haven't tried this one out, get your nose on it. It's really well done. This one's been hyped up a lot, and I feel for very good reason. It has these beautiful red berries in the opening. I do pick out strawberry among them, and it has a brilliant peach note with caramel as well. So all together you have this really sweet, seductive, fruity caramel vibe that works together really, really well. Now this one is slightly more feminine, I think, than the the typical gourmand, which is gonna be at best unisex. I find that it's very hard for a gourmand fragrance to really be heavily masculine, just because of the way the compositions typically work as being very sweet and very sultry and seductive. But nonetheless, this is an amazing fragrance, works very well, performance is very strong, and the price point on this is not so bad. I think you can get 50 ml for around $100, which isn't that bad for what you're getting. Number 2, Mula Mula by Byron Parfums. And without further ado, my number 1 spot, a new member to my collection, Kerosene Blackmail. This is one that I fell in love with right away. It has a brilliant, brilliant oud and incense combination. Doesn't make it really smoky. It has this sort of incensey kind of a vibe to it, and there is a little bit of spice in there as well. And the oud spice combo actually reminds me a little bit of oud wood, but to my nose and in my opinion, this is done much, much better. It has the same kind of oud in it, but it has the addition of the incense, which adds a nice complexity, and it makes it a little bit bigger of a fragrance. And it also has the nice addition of fruits and a little bit of vanilla to really add a sweetness to it. It balances out that spicy oud with the heavy incense to have just a little bit of sweetness there in the background, and it makes a tremendous fragrance. The other thing that's great about this, it lasts a long time. I sprayed this on my skin, lasts about 12 hours, and the price point is also quite good. You can get 100 ml for about $140, which is, I think, a fantastic deal. Anyways, guys, that's my top 10 niche list for this fall. Let me know in the comments down below what you're looking forward to wearing. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.